Welcome to The Explainer. We're constantly getting bombarded with advice on how to protect our brains. But what does the science actually say? Today, we're launching an investigation, sifting through the best evidence out there to find out what really, truly works to protect your cognitive health.
All right, so to figure out prevention, we first have to ask, when does the fight even begin? And the answer, well, it's probably not when you think. You know, most of us picture Alzheimer's as a disease of old age, something that happens later in life. But it turns out the biological evidence tells a completely different story, a much, much longer one.
Check this out. This timeline comes from a massive 20-year study, and it is stunning. It shows that the seeds of Alzheimer's are planted almost 2 decades before a doctor ever says, you have a memory problem. 18 years before diagnosis, toxic proteins start to change. Then, years later, you see signs of nerve damage. And then the brain itself actually begins to shrink. All of this is happening completely silently, under the radar. Okay, so that long timeline, yeah, it's a little scary. But here's the flip side. It's also a massive window of opportunity. This 2-decade head start is our chance. It's the time when the lifestyle changes we're about to investigate could actually make a real, meaningful difference. So let's dive into the evidence. Our investigation starts with our first and, frankly, most promising lead on the evidence board, just getting up and moving, physical activity.
The evidence for exercise is honestly a slam dunk. Just look at this summary of several huge reviews. One of them looked at over 250,000 people and found exercise boosts brain function across all ages. Another one zeroed in and found that adults over 60 got the biggest cognitive bang for their buck. And this is really interesting. A third study found that resistance training is an absolute powerhouse, showing major benefits even at levels lower than what's officially recommended.
Now, you'll see this term pop up a lot in these studies, executive function. So what is that? It's not just about remembering stuff. Think of it as the CEO of your brain. It's what helps you plan your day, focus on what you're doing, and juggle a bunch of tasks at once. It's absolutely crucial for just getting through the day, and as we're seeing, it's a key area that exercise really seems to help.
And this is where it gets really cool. It turns out not all exercise is created equal when it comes to the brain. The biggest boosts came from activities that force your brain to work with your body. Exergames, yep, video games that make you move, were at the very top. Right behind were things like yoga, tai chi, and dance. It suggests the secret sauce is combining physical movement with mental engagement. Okay, so exercise is looking like a solid clue. But our next lead, diet. Well, this is where the plot thickens. A lot. This one introduces a major puzzle into our investigation.
You've probably heard of the MIND diet. It was literally designed to improve brain health. A huge 3-year randomized trial was set up to test it. And then this bombshell dropped. The results showed no significant difference between the people on the MIND diet and the people in the control group. So what on earth is going on?
This is where you have to look at the fine print. Because the control group, they weren't just sitting around. They also got health coaching. But it was focused on portion control, not specific foods. And look at what happened. Both groups lost about 11 pounds. And, remarkably, the cognition scores for both groups went up.
And this leads us to a huge, crucial question. What if the specific diet doesn't matter as much as we think? Could it be that the real magic ingredient is simply the act of being in a program, of paying attention, of getting some coaching? Maybe that's what moves the needle. This is a critical puzzle piece for us to consider. Okay, let's move on to our final and biggest piece of evidence. This is the trial that threw everything into the mix: diet, exercise, cognitive training, to see what happens when you do it all. This is the U.S. Pointer trial, and it's a landmark study. They took over 2,000 people at risk for cognitive decline and split them into 2 camps. One group got a super intense, highly structured program with tons of coaching. The other group got a much more low-key, self-guided version. The big question was, does all that extra hand-holding really pay off? So first, let's look at the do-it-yourself group. And this is amazing. With just a little bit of educational info and a few check-ins over 2 years, their cognitive scores still went up significantly. It just confirms what we saw before. Even a light touch approach is way, way better than doing nothing at all.
Now for the group that got all the bells and whistles, the constant coaching, the 38 meetings, the whole shebang. Their scores also improved, and as you can see, the number is a little bit higher. But how much higher?
And here it is. This is the difference. It's tiny. Now, it is statistically significant, which means it's a real effect, not just random chance. But look at that number. All that extra effort, all that extra money and time for that little extra sliver of benefit.
And that brings us to the million-dollar question, which an editorial in a top medical journal basically asked. They said, look, this super intense program is incredibly expensive and difficult to scale up for everybody. Is that tiny little boost really worth it? And they suggest that probably it's not practical as a standard approach for everyone. Okay, the investigation is complete. We've looked at the timeline, the exercise data, the diet puzzle, and the big all-in-one trial. Let's step back, look at all the clues on our board, and deliver the final verdict.
So when you boil it all down, here's what we found. First, exercise is king. The evidence is strong, it's consistent, and it's our most reliable bet. Second, diet alone is tricky. The big win there might just be focusing on your health in general, not chasing a specific food list. And third, those big multi-part programs work, but going for the super intensive version gives you only a tiny edge for a whole lot more effort.
So, after all that, what's the practical takeaway? Based on the evidence, what is the smartest move for you to protect your brain health?
Well, how much time are we talking about here? The standard recommendation, about 150 minutes of aerobic exercise and 60 of strength training, adds up to 210 minutes a week. Now, that might sound like a lot, but think about it this way. There are over 10,000 minutes in a week. That's just 2% of your time. 2% for what the evidence shows is one of the most powerful investments you can make.
So the evidence from all these huge trials points to a really simple framework. Step 1, just start. Do something. We saw again and again that doing anything is demonstrably better than doing nothing. Step 2, if you're going to focus your energy somewhere, put it on exercise. That's your highest yield investment. And finally, step 3, and this is the most important, make it last. Consistency is so much more important than finding the perfect complex plan that you'll just quit in 2 weeks.
And that really is the final takeaway. The biggest challenge isn't a lack of information. We have tons of that. The challenge is crossing the gap between knowing and doing. The evidence is clear. Our most powerful strategy is starting small and being consistent. So the question isn't, what's the perfect plan? It's much simpler. What is the one small change you can commit to this week?